Africa's untapped renewable energy potential is more than 50 times the world's cumulative demand by 2030. The continent's untapped solar, wind, and geothermal potential is rated as super abundant in most African countries, meaning the potential is over 1,000 times the current demand. Yet, nearly 600 million Africans lack access to electricity, while another 150 million have highly unreliable access, and a whopping 900 million Africans have no access to clean cooking energy. Just imagine the paradox that we are in the middle of plenty while living in scarcity. The primary cause of Africa's minimal investment in exploiting its abundant green energy potential is the lack of energy-intense anchor demand. Such demand would make investment in additional energy generation capacity bankable and render universal energy access possible. Scientists tell us that achieving the net zero emissions by 2050 is imperative to sustain human civilization. Failure to reach this target will lead to devastating and irreversible impacts on ecosystems, weather patterns, and sea levels. At present rates, it will be extremely difficult, if not altogether impossible, for the world's industrial nations and fast-growing emerging economies to achieve net zero goals on time. The only way for the world to achieve this net zero aspiration by 2050 is for countries which presently have net negative emissions, as we do in most of Africa, to make up for those on course to missing the 2050 goal. The implication of this scenario is that African countries are uniquely positioned to limit own emissions and at the same time contribute reductions everywhere. We are not only in a position that we can limit our own emissions, but we can assist others. We can contribute to the reduction by others. The opportunity, therefore, exists to provide energy access for all Africans by 2030, while reducing total emissions from energy generation by creating green industrial capacity in Africa, thus positioning the continent to support the global net zero ambition. If Africa is indeed the young green continent of the future and the locus of the next industrial revolution, Africa's solutions are no longer restricted to Africa's problems. They also address humanity's problems effectively, global problems effectively. So we can confidently say that African solutions can actually provide global solutions. Aspirations often come with a problem of implementation. The concept paper contains a statement that I approved unreservedly. A sound policy framework should begin with formulation and end with implementation. But worldwide policy development is frequently prioritized without regard for performance. Our development partners tend to focus more on providing resources for policy development rather than implementing the policies. This situation has resulted in heaps of policy documents gathering clouds of dust on the shelves of government offices. As legislators, you are mandated not only to formulate law and policy, but also to rigorously oversee their implementation, to ensure that the African Union performs at the level of its aspirations it will be necessary for you, as legislators, representatives, and overseers, to make sure that it empowers itself with sufficient capacity. Otherwise, African solutions, Agenda 2063, the African Continental Free Trade Area, and the young, clean, green continent of the future will remain a mere pipe dream. I want to persuade you. The power you enjoy today is delegated to you. The authority you enjoy today is delegated to you by the people of our continent. And let me remind you that the authority that you wield comes with responsibility. And responsibility comes with accountability. Our Africa Union, we have to rethink the architecture, the governance structure of our Africa Union. This parliament must provide the accountability mechanisms to make sure that all the structures of the Africa Union ultimately are answerable to the people of this continent. It is completely against the principles of accountability to have an impotent parliament. A parliament that cannot approve the budget of our organization. A parliament that cannot hold to account the executives in our administration is not the kind of parliament the people of Africa envisaged. It's not the kind of parliament our forefathers envisaged when constituting our union. The clearest path available to humanity, not just to us, available to humanity, is to relocate global industrial production capacity to Africa, and therefore meet Africa's as well as the world's growing demand for goods and services in a green-first manner that also enables the continent to leapfrog the industrial development path taken by the global north. An African green industrial capacity will not only serve global demand, but it will also decarbonize global production, thereby fulfilling humanity's most ambitious climate goals. This is the very honest conversation we want to have. We are saying we can have a win-win in this engagement. We do not have to engage in the usual finger pointing. You caused this, you did not cause that. That's all fine. We contributed the least, that's fine. We are suffering the most, that's okay. But we can together agree on a solution that carries everybody. And that is the proposition we are having as the leadership of this continent. We are not selfish. We are willing to share, to present our resources so that we can not only solve our problem, but we can solve the global problem of climate change. The Pan-African Parliament is a critical organ of the Africa Union, whose full institutional potential is going to become manifest as we rally to formulate effective and sustainable solutions to the tremendous cries confronting our people and humanity in general. This Parliament rises higher and goes further than the sum of its legislative, representative, and oversight mandate for Africa. This assembly is the august crucible where the full range of African voices, the diversity of African ideas, and the variety of African insights interact and generate the principles and knowledge that we need to inform our endeavors to give present and future generations a prosperous and a secure Africa, together with a livable planet. I therefore congratulate all of you for the confidence you have clearly inspired to be chosen as the African people's representatives in this parliament. The world is presently confronted with a daunting array of multifaceted challenges, which range from the pandemic recovery to the existential threat of climate change. There is also the prevailing adverse financial environment characterized by increasing interest rates and looming debt distress affecting Africa and the many other regions, not forgetting the complex security implications of a delicate geopolitical crisis. At this time, your leadership as members of this House is more vital than ever to guide and support all other institutions of the African Union in pursuit of a new, ambitious, and inspiring vision. It is a time to be bold, to be strong and resolute enough to confront these challenges with greater unity and greater commitment. It is time to extend our forefathers' Pan-African dream into a brave new world in order to bequeath the people of Africa and our future generations a much better, more secure, and prosperous Africa that plays its role and makes its contribution in full to global affairs. And we must be bold because we are the continent of the future. We are the continent of young people, hungry for better life and a clear role in the world affairs. Unfortunately, however, the discursive profile of the continent has too often been focused on the challenges and the difficulties we face and the assistance we need in a way that depicts us as chronically subordinate, eternally vulnerable, and perpetually incapable. As a consequence, an emerging psychology of victimhood implicates both African and global leadership in a politics of pity and helplessness. It also denies the world's youngest continent, repository of unparalleled abundance, the agency to articulate appropriate solutions for its own problems and to offer its unique, indispensable contribution on the broader global stage. I am persuaded that our generation of African leaders has the historic mandate to retire this unhelpful profile and in its place articulate a more accurate and compelling portrait of Africa that is both faithful to fact, yet also developmentally inspirational. Through this fundamental shift, we have the opportunity to empower and mobilize our people to drive transformation, attract investment, and inspire partnerships and collaborations across the world. I see a tremendously decisive role for yourselves as members of the Pan-African Parliament, since you represent the voices of Africans on all issues pertaining to every sphere and sector of individual and collective endeavor. please don't let us down. Instead of all the games being played, all we need to do, we are telling the world, we have our assets, we are willing to have a win-win engagement. We have the largest green energy potential, resources. The world has no choice. We cannot continue the fossil fuel fired industrialization. It has to change. All we are saying is we are coming with our assets, come with investment and technology. We meet halfway and everybody wins. That's all we are saying. We are tired of complaining. We are tired of being victims. We want to be part of the solution. Don't consign Africa to the margins of problems and being victims and managing adaptation. We have better proposals that can get all of us out of the quagmire that we are all in. A critical growth opportunity that can be the starting point for our intentional efforts in pursuit of our aspiration is fiscal space arising from both debt restructuring and blended capital, combined with economic growth that increases tax revenues and positions African countries to invest more in adaptation and resilience. Once we have a win-win, once we are making money, once we are engaged in economic activity, we can take care of the adaptation. We can take care of resilience. Don't bring resilience into the equation to fool anybody that we are going to get anywhere with money for adaptation. You know, we are managing a problem. We want to be part of the solution. Don't consign us to managing a problem. I submit to you, in this esteemed assembly, my good friends, that by taking these measures with a degree of both urgency and resolve, Africa's leaders can energize our economies and inspire the people with a new vision centered on investment and growth, which is in harmony with our planet. In doing so, our generation will have discharged a tremendous historic developmental mandate while realizing our common global ambition to arrest and ultimately reverse climate change. We will also make it possible for our economies to meet the needs and fulfill the hopes of a young workforce, which grows at an annual rate of about 30 million young people in our continent, requiring us to generate millions of decent jobs every year. Your work, honorable members, therefore, is clearly cut out, and your assignment very well defined. By facilitating robust and continuous discourse on the broadest cross-section of Africa, this Parliament will simultaneously employ the federative transmission of ideas from discrete grassroots agencies to the global and continental, multilateral and intergovernmental fora, and at the same time engage the devolutionary mechanisms of domesticating global standards and international norms. Although the theme of this session is the African continent at crossroads, our discussion has enlarged our field of deliberation to encapsulate possibilities that transcend our defining dilemma of past decades. For a while, Africa has struggled with an implied trade-off between economic growth and prosperity on one hand, and environmental sustainability on the other. we can now agree that given the transitional imperative, it is possible for Africa to execute clean, green industrialization that can enable the rest of the world attain the net zero target as well. We finally have the answer to the dilemma, and with it, our way out of the thematic crossroads. Simply, Africa is the answer. We don't have to be at the crossroads. The whole reform agenda around the AU is a necessary imperative. It is not possible for us as states, as governments, to hold all the power and expect the African Union to function. We must be bold enough to delegate some of the powers of our nations to the collective body of the African Union. That is what other progressive unions have done. It is not possible for us to continue to engage with the rest of the world the way we are doing. The budget of African Union, to a good extent, is funded by development partners. What does it say about our ability to make our own decisions? It is said, he who pays the piper calls the tune. As things stand today, and I say this with tremendous respect, the Africa Commission Chair, the Africa Union Commission Chair, does not have what it takes to prosecute the agenda for our continent. We still hold all the power as heads of state and expect the union to function. It cannot function. We have to donate some of the power to the collective authority of the union. I had occasion, let me explain to you something. I had occasion a few weeks ago to talk with the German Chancellor, and he was explaining to me how Germany has donated matters trade, matters investment to the European Union. And they have immensely benefited by working together as 27 governments, 475 million people. In our continent, we still want to keep all the powers in our little corners. How are we going to negotiate with EU as a country? You know, how are you going to negotiate? And this is the candid conversation we must have. The Pan-African Parliament must operate at the same level as the European Parliament. If we have to engage with the European Union on a platform as equals, who said that Africa cannot be part of the solution? That when Africa is being discussed, it's only being discussed in the context of the problems. And our voices are limited to, oh no, you are victims of climate change. We will help you to manage situation. We will manage you to deal with adaptation. We will look for some little money for mitigation. We do not want to be in that corner. We want to be in the conversation about the solutions. And we have what it takes. And shortly, I will be proposing to you why I consider that, in fact, the reason why we have been in a circus for all these years, it's because we as Africans have not stepped forward. with our capabilities to provide the solution to this challenge of climate change. As the chair of the Committee of African Heads of State and Governments on Climate Change, I fully associate myself with the consensus that has evolved among Africa's leaders who have refused to be tethered to this unsatisfactory ideology. Instead, we have been pushing a fresh, affirmative, and solution-oriented perspective. And I have come here today to ask you to join us in executing this change of course, articulating a fundamentally Pan-African principle and amplifying new ethos that summons the world to live, produce, and consume in harmony with nature that will be spearheaded by Africa. We want to occupy every space. We are going to be consistent. We are going to be coherent. We are going to be audible until there is no place to hide. Yeah. Until the conferences are stopped. Otherwise, we will make them noisy, we will make them messy, and there will be consequences. If we are not heard, we are refusing to stay on the margins anymore. Yeah? We want to be at the table. Because we are told the risk of not being at the table is that you could be in the menu. So, we are going to occupy every space. And we have been gentlemen for far too long. We are now going to appropriate our place because we have a contribution to make. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening to me. I don't take it for granted. And God bless you.